Security roles are slightly different in an Azure SQL Server to those that you would find in a traditional on-premises SQL Server. In fact, there are only 3 server roles in an Azure SQL Server. Firstly, there is the server level principal account, and this is the account that creates the Azure SQL Server. It's equivalent to SA, but you can't call it SA, and it's possible to reset the password to this account from within the Azure portal. Like the security admin fixed server role for an on-premises instance of SQL Server, the Loginmanager Server role in SQL Azure has permissions to create and drop logins, and only members of the Loginmanager role or the server level principal login can drop and create logins. The Dbmanager role is similar to the DB Creator server role for an on-premises SQL instance, and this can create and drop databases. And again, only members of the Dbmanager role or the server level principal login can drop and create databases, and they are the only 3 security roles available at the server level within Azure SQL Server. So let's go over to the management portal and have a look at this. So here we are in the Azure portal, and here is my SQL dashboard. Now if I click on one of my Azure SQL servers, you'll see at the top here that we have the server admin, which is my POSTLEDM account, which I used to create this server. And here I can reset the password if I wish to. If I wish to give other logins, server roles and database permissions, then I have to do this through Management Studio. So here I am in Management Studio. If I want to create a login, then it is simply create login, username with password and the password you want to assign. You don't have to specify default database or default language or expiration. None of those are valid in Azure SQL database. I can then create the user in the database for the login in question. So we can run these 2 commands and they will run quite happily. If I want to assign server roles to that user, then I can do so using the add role member command. So here we have sp add role member, dbmanager to user 1, and then a login manager to user 1. And I can simply run those 2 commands, and that will create those roles for me for that user. If we have a look at the system view SQL logins, you can see that we've created all these logins, and they're obviously all SQL logins at this point. If I want to give a login permissions to a user database, then this is exactly the same as a traditional on-premises server. So if I switch to my AdventureWorks database, I can now create a user in that AdventureWorks database, and then I can assign roles as normal. So here we have DB owner, DB data writer, data reader and DDL admin, and I can run that and it will add those roles for me. Just to check, I can run this select statement to verify that the permissions are as I wanted. And here we have user 1 with data reader, data writer, DDL admin and DB owner, just as I asked for. As well as SQL logins, Microsoft Azure SQL Server and SQL Database now supports Active Directory logins. It is possible to connect your on-premises Active Directory to an Azure Active Directory so that you can have single sign-on with Azure the same as you do on-premises. If you don't have an on-premises Active Directory, you can still use Azure Active Directory, and if you look here you can see that I have an Active Directory admin called David at clooneywebco.onmicrosoft.com, and that's an Active Directory which has been created for my account. On the list down here you can see the option Azure Active Directory. If we click on that, this will open up the Azure Active Directory screen for us. So here is my Azure Active Directory screen. You can see that I already have some users created, and my default directory, David Clooney Web Co, is at the top of the screen. So to create a user is very straightforward. We simply click on Add User. We need to assign the person a name, so I'm going to call him James. Give him his username, James at, and then the default directory name. I could give him a profile. I could assign him properties, but I don't actually have any properties that we need. I'm not going to give him any groups or a directory role at this stage. And Azure has assigned him a password. So let's click Create. And that will now create for me a new user called James. So if I now refresh this screen, let's click on Azure Active Directory again. And there we now have JA for James. Now if I want to create James as a user within Azure SQL database, I can do this from Management Studio. Now if I come over here, I have the command already set up here, create user James at from external provider. But if I run this, it doesn't work first of all. It will come back and tell us that only connections established with Active Directory accounts can create other Active Directory accounts. So currently I'm only logged in using my Postly DM SQL account. So I need to log back in as an Azure Active Directory user first of all. Now if we go back to the portal, how do we do this? Because obviously we're in a bit of a chicken and egg situation. I can create new Active Directory accounts, but I can't create logins to SQL because I can't log in to an Active Directory account as SQL. But we can fix this. So if we go to SQL Servers, and select our SQL Server, we have an option here called Access Control, an IAM. And if I click on this, this is where I can make Active Directory logins owners of an Azure SQL database. So let's click on Add. And here I can select the role, which in this case would be DB owner. And then I could assign different users to that role. Well, David is already assigned as the owner, so I'm not going to complete this task. But you can, before you can assign Active Directory users permissions to a SQL database, you need to make one Active Directory user an owner of that Azure SQL Server. And I've already given David at David Clooney Web Co database owner permissions, as you saw on the screen back here. Oops. If we click on there again and go to the overview, you can see that the admin is already set up for that. So if I go back to Management Studio and I log back in, this time instead of using SQL Server authentication, we have an option called Active Directory and Password, and this allows us to type in the Active Directory login name and a password. Normally when you're logging in on premises, you can log in, you only get this option called Windows Authentication, where it assumes you're logging in as the person you're logged in as, so you can't put a password in. But we now have this option called Active Directory Password, so I can log in using an Active Directory account, or at least an Azure Active Directory account, and type the password in. So now I can click OK, and it logs me in. Now I can use this to create a user, James at Clooney Web Co, for external provider. And then I can start assigning him read, write, DB owner access, whatever he needs to be able to do his job. So we can start using Active Directory login within Azure SQL Database, which should be more secure than SQL logins. I hope that has been useful to you. Please visit my YouTube channel to see more clips on using Microsoft Azure SQL databases and other SQL presentations, and you can download my free ebook from gethinellis.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you later.